Your favorite scent is the last thing you will ever smell before you become part of the silence of your own home. In the rain-slicked suburbs of the Pacific Northwest and the damp outskirts of southern England, a peculiar phenomenon is unfolding behind locked doors. It begins with the sudden, overwhelming aroma of fresh lavender blooming in the middle of a winter storm. It ends with a bed that is perfectly made, yet entirely empty, leaving behind nothing but a faint, shimmering residue on the hardwood floor and a lingering sense of peace that feels entirely wrong. There are no signs of a struggle, no broken windows, and no forced entries. There is only the scent, the dampness, and the vanishing. Local authorities have begun to notice a pattern in these quiet neighborhoods where the humidity rarely drops below 80%. They call them cold cases, but the air in these homes is never cold. It is heavy, moist, and floral. Those who have caught a glimpse of the movement in the shadows speak of something impossible. Soft, undulating shapes that stretch nearly 7 feet in length, moving with a grace that defies their size. They do not walk or crawl in any way we recognize. They flow. They are the velvet strangers, entities that have adapted to the modern sprawl by turning our desire for comfort against us. To look at one is to see a living contradiction. Their bodies are covered in a dense, microscopic forest of cilia that feels like the most expensive velvet ever woven. This coating serves a dual purpose. It muffles every sound of their movement, allowing them to glide over carpet and tile with less noise than a drifting dust mote. More importantly, this velvet layer is the source of the lavender mist. It is a biological sedative, a chemical signature designed to bypass the human alarm system. When the scent hits the nostrils of a sleeping resident, the brain does not trigger a fight or flight response. Instead, it sinks deeper into the delta wave state, the most profound level of unconsciousness, where dreams are forgotten and the body becomes completely still. The velvet strangers do not seek conflict. They are masters of the gentle approach. They wait for the rainy season when the ground is saturated and the air is thick with mist, to emerge from the shadowed green belts and crawl spaces. They can flatten their boneless forms to the thickness of a coin, sliding through the gaps beneath front doors or the vents in the laundry room. Once inside, they follow the heat signatures of the inhabitants. They are drawn to the warmth of a life lived in comfort, seeking the quiet energy that radiates from a body at rest. The process of their arrival is almost poetic in its quiet intensity. A resident might stir in their sleep, sensing a subtle change in the room's atmosphere. But the lavender scent is so persuasive that the mind simply incorporates it into a pleasant dream. They might dream of a summer field or a childhood garden, even as a soft, heavy weight begins to settle over their blankets. The velvet strangers do not bite or sting. They simply overlap. They drape themselves over the sleeping form like a living shroud, their velvet underside making direct contact with the skin. Through a process of biological exchange, the visitor begins to harmonize with the host. It is not an act of aggression, but a slow, rhythmic assimilation. They absorb moisture and essence directly through the dermal layer, a silent transfer that leaves the individual in a state of permanent, peaceful suspension. It is as if the person is being slowly translated into a different language, their physical presence fading while the visitor grows more vibrant, its velvet coat glowing with a faint, bioluminescent hue. By the time the sun rises, the bed is empty. The visitor has retracted, retreating back into the damp darkness of the foundation, leaving the house exactly as it was, minus its heart. Neighbors in these affected areas have started to change their habits, though few will admit why. They install industrial-sized dehumidifiers that hum throughout the night, desperate to keep the air dry and uninviting to a creature made of moisture. They seal their doors with weather stripping and check the perimeter of their homes for the telltale signs of a shimmering trail. But the velvet strangers are patient. They can wait for months in the crawl spaces, living off the condensation of the pipes, listening to the heartbeat of the house above. They are waiting for the one night the machine fails, or the one evening a window is left cracked to let in the fresh evening air. Consider the case of a small cul-de-sac in a mist-heavy valley. In a single week, 3 houses fell silent. There were no sirens, no shouts in the night. In each instance, the mail began to pile up on the porch, and the lawns grew slightly too long. When investigators finally entered, they found the interiors in pristine condition. The kitchens were clean, the clocks were ticking, and the air smelled like a high-end spa. But the inhabitants were simply gone. In one bedroom, a wedding ring was found sitting on the nightstand, resting in a small pile of fine purple dust. It was as if the person had simply evaporated out of their jewelry. There is a theory among those who study these occurrences that the velvet strangers are not a new species, but an ancient one that has finally found the perfect environment in our climate-controlled lives. Our homes are warm, our beds are soft, and our cities are increasingly built on the reclaimed wetlands that these entities have called home for millennia. We have provided them with a buffet of stillness. The more we isolate ourselves in our suburban sanctuaries, the more we become the perfect, undisturbed subjects for their quiet work. They are a biological puzzle that suggests we are not the masters of our environment that we think we are. We are merely the current residents of a world that is much older, much softer, and much hungrier than we dare to imagine. The psychological toll on the survivors, those who wake up to find a spouse or a child gone without a trace, is profound. There is no closure, no evidence of a crime to point to. There is only the lingering smell of lavender that refuses to dissipate, no matter how much they scrub the floors. Some report hearing a soft, rhythmic pulsing in the walls during rainstorms, a sound like a heavy heart beating in a chamber of velvet. It is a sound that suggests the visitors haven't truly left, but are simply resting, waiting for the next cycle of the moon and the next heavy downpour. What makes the velvet strangers so effective is their lack of malice. They do not operate on hate or hunger in the way we understand it. They are simply existing in a state of constant, gentle expansion. They are the ultimate house guests, arriving uninvited and leaving without a word, taking only what they need to sustain their beautiful, soft existence. The terror lies in the realization that your own comfort is the lure. The softer your sheets, the more peaceful your sleep, the more attractive you are to the creature sliding silently down the hallway. The scientific community remains divided, with many dismissing the stories as urban legends fueled by the isolation of the modern era. They point to the lack of physical specimens as proof of their non-existence. But those who live in the mist-heavy valleys know better. They know that a creature made of water and soft fibers does not leave a skeleton. It does not leave a footprint. It only leaves a void. They have learned to trust their senses over official reports. When the air in the bedroom suddenly turns sweet and floral, they do not breathe deep and succumb to the dream. They stand up, turn on every light, and run for the driest ground they can find. For most, however, the warning comes too late. The lavender scent is a master key to the subconscious. It bypasses the rational mind and speaks directly to the ancient, tired parts of the human spirit that just want to rest. It promises an end to the stress of the day, an end to the noise of the world. It is a siren song for the sense of smell, and in that moment of surrender, when the eyes flutter shut and the muscles go limp, the velvet stranger makes its move. It is a heavy, soft, and fragrant transition from one state of being to another. In the quiet hours of the night, if you listen closely to the rain hitting your roof, you might hear a sound that doesn't belong. It is not the wind, and it is not the settling of the timber. It is the sound of something soft sliding against something hard. It is the sound of the velvet strangers navigating the architecture of your life. They are moving through the shadows, their long, supple bodies coasting over the threshold. They are not here to cause pain. They are here to share the silence. The mystery of the velvet strangers remains one of the great, unaddressed anomalies of our time. It challenges our understanding of biology and our sense of security within our own walls. We like to believe that our homes are fortresses, that the locks on our doors keep the world at bay. But the velvet strangers remind us that there are things in the dark that do not care for locks. They remind us that the world is still a place of deep, damp mysteries, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can encounter is a beautiful scent and the promise of a long, deep sleep. Imagine a woman named Emily. She lives in a house where the walls are painted the color of a morning mist. She prides herself on her collection of high thread count linens and her nightly routine of lighting a single candle to signal the end of the day. One Tuesday, the rain begins to fall with a rhythmic intensity. She closes her windows, checks the locks, and settles into her bed. As she drifts off, a faint scent of lavender fills the room. She smiles, thinking her husband must have left a sachet under her pillow as a surprise. She doesn't notice the way the air in the room becomes heavy and thick. She doesn't see the shadow that detaches itself from the corner of the ceiling, a shape that flows like spilled ink, moving toward the warmth of her blankets. By morning, the candle has burned down to a nub of wax. The house is silent. When her husband returns from a business trip later that afternoon, he finds the bed perfectly made, the pillows fluffed, and the room smelling like a fresh garden. Emily is not in the kitchen. She is not in the garden. He calls her name, his voice echoing through the quiet halls, but there is no answer. He finds her phone on the nightstand, fully charged. He finds her shoes by the door. But as he stands in the center of their bedroom, he notices a faint, shimmering dust on the floorboards, reflecting the afternoon light like crushed amethysts. And he realizes with a sudden bone-deep chill that the air is far too sweet. As the suburbs continue to push further into the damp forests of the world, these stories become more frequent, or rather, the lack of sound becomes more notable. Whole neighborhoods are beginning to drift into a state of quiet preservation. When the mail piles up and the lawns grow long, investigators find the same scene over and over. A house that smells like a sanctuary, a bed that is still warm, and a faint trail of purple dust leading toward the cellar. The transition is so seamless that the world barely notices when someone is taken. A life is replaced by a fragrance. A person becomes a memory, held in the velvet folds of a creature that belongs to the mist. This is the quiet reality of the velvet strangers. A dark narrative played out in the most mundane of settings, where the intruder doesn't roar, but whispers a sweet, floral lullaby that you will never wake up from. The mystery continues to grow, hidden in the damp corners of our world, moving with a velvet touch through the shadows of our deepest sleep. As the sun sets over the damp suburbs, the cycle begins again. The moisture clings to the windows, and the shadows stretch long across the floorboards. Somewhere, in a house not unlike yours, the air is beginning to turn sweet. The lavender is blooming in the dark, and the velvet strangers are beginning their long, silent flow toward the warmth. They are the guests you never invited, the shadows you can't quite see, and the scent you will never forget. They are the velvet strangers, and they are already inside, waiting for you to find the peace of a deep, dreamless sleep. The rain continues to fall, feeding the hidden world beneath our feet. The velvet strangers grow in the darkness, their soft bodies expanding as they move from house to house, leaving behind a trail of lavender and empty lives. They are a reminder that in the dark, damp places of the world, there are still things that move with a grace we cannot understand, seeking a connection that we are not prepared to give. When you go to bed tonight, make sure the air is dry, make sure the windows are tight, and if you smell the flowers, remember that some scents are not a gift, but a departure. The story of the Velvet Strangers is far from over. It is written in the mist and the shadows, a mystery that remains unsolved, a question mark hanging in the damp air of the suburbs. As long as there is rain, as long as there is warmth, and as long as we continue to seek the comfort of a deep sleep, the Velvet Strangers will be there, sliding through the cracks, moving toward the scent of a life at rest. They are the silent partners in our suburban dream,
morning.
the velvet shadows that turn our sanctuary into their destination. Listen to the rain, watch the shadows, and whatever you do, stay awake when the lavender begins to bloom. The silence of the suburbs is not always a sign of peace. Sometimes, it is the sound of a transformation already complete, leaving behind only the scent of flowers and a room that is perfectly, hauntingly empty.